The Deepwater Horizon rig was the deepest that man has ever gone into the earth, the deepest. So it's like Icarus, the story of the kid that got the wings and he made the wings and he flew too high and the sun melted the wings and he crashed and died. This is Icarus in reverse. They went too deep.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, after all these years, I suppose the one thing that I take for granted is that the sets will be great. I've worked on a lot of movies, you know. The one thing that's always impressive, seems like, and on Deepwater Horizon, they did have the money and the time to just be incredibly realistic and accurate.
I mean, we went for a very high level of realism with our set design, and our production design team was extraordinary. And we obviously built a giant rig, one of the, I think, biggest sets ever built.
I would say it's certainly the biggest engineering feat I've been involved with, and I would venture to guess it might be the heaviest set was ever built. I mean, we bought 2 million pounds of steel to build this thing. We had 64 trucks of cement. We had, you know, insane amounts of construction. The thing is, at its highest point, I want to say it was 82 feet off the ground.
We build this whole thing on the ground. What are the problems with doing that?
What do you see out of it?
You see the front of the rig and the ocean.
Well, the ocean's easy.
Yeah.
The ocean we're never going to have anyway, right?
The front of the rig is not that difficult either. We can shoot plates from
All right,
the set.
so let's build this on the ground.
Done.
Okay, this is being built on the ground. Done. End of story.
So we're now up on the drill deck, which is above the main deck. So this was a pretty important piece because this is where everything happened in here. And also we put an awful lot of time and effort to getting this right with the detail because there's just so much took place here. And also it's an environment that nobody's really ever seen before. You know, this is my bit. We're on a spaceship. This is nobody sees this kind of stuff. So we had to get it right.
One of the most important elements of the movie, or how the movie is made, or the visual treatment of the movie, was to keep the foreground and midground, the elements of the oil rig, of the people, of all the layers that you're seeing visually, real as much as possible.
On our drill deck, there are only 2 pieces of real equipment here. One would be the roughneck, which is the red piece of equipment there. We actually ended up buying that. And then the piece behind you, which is the assistant driller's shack. Those are the only 2 pieces that we ended up buying because we had a huge weight issue. We've got so much weight up here, so we ended up having to build everything. We got the top drive here, which is actually twice as big as this. We're going to be extending this in visual effects. These things are just so heavy in real life, so we ended up building all this stuff in the end.
And other sets that we put on top of that rig, sometimes with computers, sometimes practically.
I'm Mark Fisicella. I'm the supervising art director on the movie. And we're here at our Six Flags lot where we're constructing our main rig of the Deepwater Horizon. We just raised the helipad, which is now set atop the what will be the bridge set.
In fact, we landed a helicopter on it, so it had to be really rigorous engineering because the helicopter, and we have real people in that helicopter, and our whole cast is getting off the helicopter, their arrival.
It was an extraordinarily complex build, and if you're gonna build a set that has a helicopter pad, a working helicopter pad, you're no longer being held accountable by traditional Hollywood film set construction codes of engineering, and you're now dealing with the Department of Louisiana engineers, and they're coming down and having to triple sign off on every weld and ultrasound the welds to make sure that they're solid, and you're being held to the same standard that you would be held to if you were building a hotel or an apartment building, which, you know, considering you're building a movie set that's only going to be used for X number of weeks, You know, that's an interesting reality, so you want to make sure you really use it, and I think we put it to great use.
Mike Williams, you cheap bastard!
Yeah, the set got a little bit complicated because we got lucky. We got really lucky because, you know, you're talking about hurricane season and just weather in general, and we're up there, you know, 100 feet in the air. Somebody's got to go to the bathroom, you're just shutting down. So we're able to then kind of break it up into sections. But, you know, you want to make it as realistic as possible. You know, you could go on a large stage and just green screen and just say, okay, well, this is there and this is there, and, you know, and just kind of run around and then kind of figure it out with ILM later on, but we wanted to make it real.
And then there's just the general safety issue that because we're dealing with fire and heavy pressure, oil blowing out, and slippery floors and hard steel surfaces at that height, and it's 120 degrees and real humid, and there could be another hurricane coming at any minute in New Orleans, that we had to plan very carefully to make sure that we were, you know, creating a safe environment for our cast and crew. It's also just logistically complicated because if something breaks, it's going to be an hour to go down and get it and bring it back up, and you know, time is precious when you're filming. So we had to plan and be, you know, very meticulous about what we were doing and how we were doing it.
In the bridge, for instance, it was all windows all over the place. And the ceilings were very shiny. So when we arrived there the first time, the set was not built. It was the ceilings and the windows. I started realizing that the shininess of the ceilings will not allow us to put green screen because it will mean that green will be reflected everywhere. So we decided to put a cyc with the ocean, with the Caribbean Ocean and the little clouds and all that, and light it like that. And the windows really helped in order to work 360 degrees to be able to look anywhere.
So we're on the bridge of the Deepwater Horizon, which was what surprised us and what surprised me up front was because when we first started budgeting and planning this, we were looking at other bridges, and we hadn't got a clue how technologically advanced this particular bridge was. These bridges were so far ahead of their time. And obviously, this is all this stuff is now 10 years old. So we not only, you can't get this equipment anymore. So we had to build everything from scratch. And that created its own problems in itself because there are no drawings. So we had to just make the whole lot up. So we then started contacting the manufacturers to try and figure out what this stuff looked like. You know, it was 10-year-old stuff. All the instrumentation on here, the screens and everything, this is all state-of-the-art stuff for when the accident happened. But obviously now it's all 10 years old, and with all this stuff, it just gets trashed. Nobody keeps anything. So we were trying to work from brochures and stuff like that.
So we're trying to follow each person that we know, where they've gone and what they've done and what they went through and where everybody was and how they escaped, how they helped each other. And so to do this, we've broken the setup into a number of pieces. Some is really at 50 feet in the air on a giant, huge, multi-million pound steel set.
You know, that's when you make movies and you get to see something like that, you're like, whoa, that's so cool, because it was right on. You know, they built such a realistic model of this rig.
I prefer the live. I prefer real because it makes me think of something. It kicks me off. The other actors and I can work with it, you know.
It creates an environment that's really easy to live in, I guess, and to act in, because it's almost, you know, a lot of the acting's taken out of it. You're kind of just, you're immersed in it. It's a lot easier to always be in as much of an authentic environment as you can possibly create, you know. In a rig like that, you know, again, it's like we were so lucky to have that, you know, we were so lucky to be able to kind of build that on the set. We had the capacity to do so. I've never seen anything like that.
You're actually uncomfortable. You're feeling the heat, you're feeling the smoke, you're getting hit with debris, you're not in danger per se, but you're close.
I much prefer, and come from a time when it was all real, no matter what, and that involves stunts too.
Cut! Static release! Cut!
When the train's actually coming down the track and you gotta go across the train track and you do the old stumble and the audience goes, and then you just make it across. In the old days, well, you did it as good as you could do it. You didn't mess up. You didn't fall down because you were gonna get one shot at that. Nowadays, there's no train there. There's probably no tracks.
Something that we did talk about, is that if you think about what happened in the Deepwater Horizon, the rig was having trouble doing its job. It was supposed to have found this oil, stabilized it, and capped it 40-odd days prior to it blowing out. And the rig, I believe, was operating somewhere around $1.5 million a day.
Bob, let me impose upon you what I think is most important here. We need to go from Macondo to Casquita by May 16th.
They were 43 days behind schedule. They were over budget. And you could see a lot of similarities of what happens when you're 43 days behind and over budget on a movie. The company's paying close attention to what's going on. People are feeling the pressure of what's going on. They feel the responsibility of what's going on.
So there was a lot of money at play. They were behind schedule. And that's when people started making bad decisions. And in many ways, I understand that. If you're my boss and I'm not doing my job and I'm costing a lot of money, well, you're gonna get your ass handed to you. So you're gonna hand me my ass and we're all gonna start working probably a little bit faster and maybe cutting a few corners.
Deepwater Horizon, this is Damon Bankston. Go ahead.
The OIM wants to know what you're doing here.
Well, here we're getting off this beast and moving on to the next.
You can call it a bitch. When are we supposed to be leaving?
Well, I'm told to be ready to start taking on drilling mud about 1800.
Wow.
And on movie sets, everything's fine as long as you're making your days, you're not going over budget, everything looks good. You don't ever see the studio, you don't ever talk to them. But once you start getting over budget and people start getting nervous, then pressure starts being pushed downstream, and that's when you can cut corners. And in the case of a movie like Deepwater, you could end up doing something that's not as safe as it should be, and someone could get hurt. And we were going to be real sure that that didn't happen.
So we have all the same issues as last night. When the fire bars are on, when we cut the shot and we bring them down, they're going to be hot. We need to keep away from them. Wind as well. If the wind picks up a bit, then we need to be careful with certain flames when you bring them up to height, so that they don't get too close. There's also fumes issues if the wind's blowing this way, and we've got the big propane in the water, then it'll get a bit fumy. So all these issues could happen tonight. Smoking, okay? We're very strict on smoking. If anyone's found smoking up here, be prepared to be dismissed instantly, okay? We're standing at the top, 60 feet off the ground with enough gas to probably blow up half of New Orleans here. So let's not smoke up here. Very, very silly. Please, please, please. And if anyone sees someone smoking, you don't have to call them out. You come and tell me, and they'll hear about it.
But I liked it. I like going up on the rig by myself. I'd go up there during the day, I'd get to work early, just kind of walk around with Mike, and I really wanted to know and understand all the different things. There's so many moving parts. I mean, at one point he said there was literally 390 pieces of equipment that needed maintenance, and that was just scratching the surface.
The sets were unbelievable. I mean, what man can make is unreal. And talk about putting an actor right where they need to be when you are just making this life-size oil rig on land. It was spectacular.
But for us, I mean, you feel like you're doing something real. You're not surrounded by green screens, and you're not kind of, on a wire, and then all of that's going to be you in space. It's so much easier for us to do our job when we're surrounded by something believable. At least to us. Anything that can make us feel more like that it's more real. I guess it helps.
What the hell's going on here?
You got flow.
Very good. John Malkovich is a very unique human being. Took a big fall, kept going.
It's a huge set. It's obviously super hyper realistic, with the exact lifeboats, with the exact surfaces. Let's say it's not difficult to imagine the confusion and the panic that must have ensued.
On this film, from the special effects standpoint, from what I do for a living, very, very challenging. Everything's on this huge scale. Ready, and so we're trying to get a test set up here to show the initial mud blowout, so we can show our director if we're on the right path or not, if we're doing the, the right amount, the right speed. It's not the finished product, but it'll be close.
One of the interesting things was the testing part of this, because there's a certain texture to what they call mud.
You big, beautiful mud!
And we had to keep experimenting with it because sometimes it looked too thin, sometimes it looked too thick. And we had our experts going, well, that looks good, or that doesn't look good. And then how does it spray out? How does it, under pressure, what does it do?
We have fire, but we need hundreds of feet of fire. Yes, we need some, but sometimes we need the fire 20, 30, 40 feet tall. We're never going to be able to match the 300-foot flame, but we're going to do our best. We're going to get as much as we can before CG takes over. We're trying to keep this as live as we can and as real as we can.
Then you do think about it and you say, it's just not that easy to just put it all together. And I do know that I think they were like 9 or 10 months building it. And it's got to be a little unique in that some of it has to break down so you can shoot the way the director wants to be able to move around and shoot.
And we had a lot of lights, and we're using these LED walls with images of fire to light a lot of it. So we have to have a huge construction crane to hang the LED walls to be able to light. So all that is, we have the construction cranes that are big, 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 and all those lights everywhere, they had to be big lights because you have to put them away from the rig. So I don't know the number of people. There's a lot of people involved.
So it's actually very, very realistic, but it's also clever. It's also, you're able to pull pieces of it away and be able to get camera crews in to shoot something from a certain angle that the director knows he wants to do. And then there's a lot of CGI involved too. So it's Hollywood at its best. It's Hollywood magic. They're really great at what they do. They're fantastic.
Set-wise, they built more than we could have possibly hoped for. There was a 85% scale, 60 feet off the ground, steel structure built in the middle of a giant parking lot with a huge water tank under it, and a helipad that you could actually land a helicopter on. For all that, though, it was still just the front face of the rig. The other 200 by 200 feet aspects of it, including all the workings of the wellhead and the derrick mast, all that needed to be CG.
Trying to position an eye line for the crane operator. It's a little tricky because we have the base of it, and the cab hangs off to the side, 50 feet off the ground, and we need it so that Mark Wahlberg's eye line can be correct when he gets his lines from the deck up there.
ILM is the best, and it's a confounding experience because these guys are really smart. They are technical beyond belief.
Pete was pretty intense when we first met, and he's an intense guy. He can be intense talking about chocolate chips, but speaking about a subject that was important to him, it became very clear very early that the emphasis was on realism, was on telling the story and having the effects support it.
You really have no control or general vernacular that you can use to speak with them. It's like they're speaking Mandarin Chinese and you're speaking, Swahili. They're just so different. So you have to just be like, this doesn't look real. This needs to look more real. I don't know what that means to you. That's what I say to them. Figure it out. And they're like, well, you mean like the G particle of the third retro is not, I really don't know what that means. I just know this doesn't look real. It make it look real.
To Pete, that means the fire, everything had to be as real as possible and as intense as possible. He kept using the word fierce, especially when referring to the dynamics and the disaster itself. Whenever we started talking about fire, it had to be more real, more intense, more epic than what you'd seen before.
And the thing about ILM is they know how to get it, and it might take a minute and you have to learn each other's language, but I thought they did a wonderful job with the fire, which is not easy, with the atmosphere, which is not easy. The set extensions I knew they could do well, but the energy of that rig falling apart, I thought they did a very good job.
Whenever you have a script like this, that's of this scale, there's always a division between visual effects and we're in the same group, but it's between visual effects and on-set effects. And so we desperately try to narrow down what we can do practically, that they can augment and make better, and then what they're going to do completely digitally, either with plates, elements, or just complete CG.
There were times where even the sets that they built, which were great to shoot on, you could get any angles you wanted, and you could have pyro on the set. It would have to be replaced because even the pyro that you could put on the set would be very sourcey and very safe looking. There's something about movie fire on sets that it has to be safe. It's very dangerous. But there's a propane look to it that isn't the fiery, intense Inferno that you need in a movie like this.
That's a long process just in itself, and it's an evolving process that, wow, we can do that, so let's shoot it live, or, oh my God, we can't do that, and then VFX comes to the rescue.
Effects like this movie, they're based in reality, and there's not the fantasy aspect to it that you can kind of escape in your imagination. It becomes a challenge of matching what people have in their minds. Everybody's seen fire. Even this specific fire, the majority of people have seen some footage of it, or at least photographs of it. They understand the scale of it, they understand the intensity of it. So it's a challenge to us to kind of match that expectation.
The physics of it was really important to us. Also, fire in general has not been done very well in visual effects. My experience, my point of view, and I think a lot of us has been, they haven't quite gotten it right up to now. And so we went to ILM and said, okay, here's our problem with fire. We see this problem, we see this and that. And so we integrated special effects fire with the CGI aspect of fire in a way that was very, very cohesive between the two units. And ILM really pushed the limits of what they've done, and I think they did an extraordinary job.
These sets were built for pyro. There were special effects rigs all over these sets, and special effects teams, an army of men out there trying to rig this up to give as much realism as possible in camera. It just helps everyone. The actors actually get a sense of that kind of urgency of fire, and even though it's fire bars and it's put in pretty safe areas, that they know where the actors are going to be, they know the areas of influence of the fire, it's still, you feel the heat.
The other actors and I can work with it rather than either imagine it being there or not even know what is going to be there.
It's nowhere near what the actual rig was, but still, seeing the flame, seeing how the interactive light goes everywhere, feeling the heat, it really helps the actors get into the tone of the movie, everyone to understand exactly what these guys went through, and it also serves the purpose of giving us something in camera to match to. So you have to start making decisions out there of your exposure of the camera, what you're going to frame for. All those things are really important when it comes to the final product, and especially for us, to give us something to match to and something to tie into.
What I love most about this process is those practical effects and how it interacts with me, with my lighting, with the cameras, and with the actors. And that makes a huge difference.
There was quite a substantial amount of planning. The question will be figuring out how what we need to actually have here so that we can make the visual seamless, unedited transition from here to here, which shouldn't be a problem. You know, we use pre-visualization where we animate certain sequences that combine visual effects and computer effects and stunts and pyrotechnics and all those kinds of different elements where they all have to work together to get a specific sequence or a shot.
It brings everybody into the story. It definitely helps the cast. You're not talking to a blue wall.
You know, that can be months of planning, particularly when you're dealing with the height that we were filming at, which, you know, in many cases was well over 100 feet, which is obviously a lethal fall. If anybody is to you know, fall or it would be very bad.
And you're up very high, so the sense of danger and the sense of participation of what it feels like to be up high that was one of the reasons we wanted to do that, was because how do you feel that way if you're, you know, 5 feet off the ground?
Oh, you let go of me! Okay, don't touch me! Don't touch me! Don't touch me! You jump! Do what you want. You know what? I'm gonna do whatever you do. My wife's name is Felicia, and my daughter's Sydney, and I will see them again. Do you understand me?
But, you know, because there's so much reference material available and we were able to get so many real oil people to come consult with us, we aspired to, and I think we're able to achieve, a pretty high level of accuracy, particularly to anyone that has never, you know, worked on an oil rig.
It's certainly the biggest set I've ever been involved in, and I'm guessing I ever will be involved with.
This is motor vessel Damon Banks. The Deepwater Horizon has exploded and is on fire.